See, Luke Roderick called me. I guess he represents OML.
Please, all members are present. We did have a meeting last week, and can I get approval of those minutes, please? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No. All right. We'll move forward. We have one new piece in front of us today, authorizing the mayor to apply for, and if awarded, accept a Violence Against Women Act grant administered by the Office of Criminal Justice Services, authorizing the Director of Law to enter into an agreement with the Oriana House, Inc. to implement the grant by continuing to fund 2 investigators for the Domestic Violence Unit and declare an emergency. And we have our City Prosecutor, Gert Wellms, with us today.
Thank you. Again, Gert Wellms, Akron Chief City Prosecutor. We are here to apply for our grant with the State of Ohio, OCJS. We have received this grant more on than off for the last 20 years. It is a $60,000 grant with a match from the city. That is the max funds. We can definitely, other funding resources, but this one is just a $60,000 grant. We do use it to pay part of the salaries for our domestic violence prosecutors, investigator unit. We use capacities too. More than half of the work they do for us is the DV work, the domestic violence work that helps assist my office with the prosecution of these cases. It can be anything from medical records, 911 calls, copying texts, and rides to court as needed, because sometimes it is just that basic transportation issue to get people to court to participate in the prosecution and the successful prosecution of these cases. So that's the way we use these funds. We currently have on staff Marcus Miller. Sharon Price was with us for years. Sharon regrettably retired in February. We have made an offer to John Bell, who's currently in our Detective Bureau, and I believe John Bell will be joining us beginning of May for the open investigator. We do that in positions through Oriana with the contract, so we're asking for approval on both those matters. I would just ask consent. The grant actually doesn't even open, the solicitation doesn't open until May 1st, and the proposal's not due till June 3rd, so we definitely have some time on this.
All right, good deal. Thanks. Any questions, committee members? Councilwoman Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first I want to thank you for coming so people could possibly ask with what you just submitted to us. But I am curious, you said we have gotten this grant for about 20 years. Any likelihood that we wouldn't get it at all? Because I know it's funding 2 people that are instrumental. So
the only hiccup that, one, because we have received it so long, a lot of times they consider grant dollars startup. And I would like to consider 20 years. Our program's still in its infancy, but I have to be realistic, and they might say, hey, we need to give somebody an opportunity. The second issue, and we've ran into it with other grants that we've tried to pursue in our domestic violence world, is our family violence court program. There's a diversion aspect to that program. It's for first-time offenders who do not use weapons. We allow them to go through our 12-month court with a dismissal at the end. And some of the grant fundings do not allow for that. They do not allow for a diversion program. So we have kind of been hedging that and are on this side of it. We do intend to have pretty lengthy conversations this year. That court was run by Judge Callahan for years, Kathy Michael for nearly a decade, but now there's been a change with Judge Michael going to the Common Pleas Court with Judge Cable, and Judge Cable is actually pretty open to the conversations, getting the stakeholders back to the table to see if maybe we need to address best practices again. So transparency, that is an issue that's been giving us really hard time pursuing other money. So we're hoping that it's still something the state will consider for this particular grant, especially since we've received the funding in the past.
Well, I appreciate that you are looking at other avenues that might shore this up in the event. But as you mentioned, startups are startups, and sometimes they come back to bite us. All of a sudden we don't have it, and we're expecting it. So thank you for your honesty and for all the information that you've put forth.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions? Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the two investigators are who?
Marcus Miller and John Bell. Marcus is retired Akron police officer. That's part of the requirements. They have to be retired on good standing and still working as a reserve with the Akron Police Department. The second one is John Bell. John's currently a detective, daytime detective in our juvenile bureau, and has reached his limit with the city of Akron, and is, I'm pretty sure, maxing out his days with drop and then transferring over to our office.
So I guess the question was, I know we had a female retire, and it's a grant for violence against women. Disproportionately, when we look at domestic violence in women, I was just curious, did we seek out?
I actually sought out a list of reserve officers. I only had 2 apply, and both were male. So, and John Bell actually had some pretty specialized training for this particular population. Came very highly recommended from his supervisors, so we went with that choice. And again, it was a choice of 2 males.
Yeah, so I know since I've been one, every time you come before us, it's always been a concern of mine is that we find some resource so we can support this particular piece as a part of the work you do. I'm hopeful that future-wise there's some dollars because I think even if not in a role, that particular role as the 2 investigators, or having a woman's presence in the midst of that, I think is critically important.
Well, if it gives you any comfort, Bertrand King has told me to keep one of those jobs open for her.
Okay.
So I feel
so much more comfortable.
Somebody in mind.
But yeah, I appreciate that. I just think
there.
it's just a matter of important for